Don't you think so? The second thing he says is not only is worry foolish, but it's futile. Look at what verse 25 through 27 says. Wow, I love this part. Can you add 1 cubit to his height by worrying? How many of you, when you were growing up and young and you wanted to play basketball for the University of Kentucky, but you were only going to be about 5'8" or 5'10", tried to figure out everything in the world to get you taller, thinking that you might be able to make it somehow? You worried about those things. You always tried to get a little taller. You did everything in the world to do that. What does he say? He says, can worry add anything to your height? If then you're not able to even add to even a little thing, why do you worry about everything else that you don't have control of? Consider how the wildflowers grow. They don't sit around laboring or worrying or spinning thread. Yet I tell you, not even Solomon in all of his splendor was adorned as the beauty of my creation, of the things that I created. God says, if I want this to happen, it can happen. But the more you're worrying about it, and the more you're using all of your strength and activities and all of your time trying to do something that I said I would do, then you're not doing what I challenged you to do. And what you're doing is not going to accomplish what you wanted to accomplish. How frustrating is it to try and try and try and still not accomplish what you want to accomplish? It's frustrating, isn't it? You ever notice that? And sometimes you just have to step away and get a little perspective, don't you? And quit worrying, quit, straining so hard against something. And it works out. It's 2 reasons, aren't there? First, it's foolish. Second, it's futile. It's not going to do any good. If worry is that way, then, folks, how do we overcome it? If you really believe that worry doesn't accomplish anything in your life except giving you gray hair or bald hair or no hair, making you old, giving you indigestion, creating those astronomical numbers of 80 to 85% of caseload directly created to anxiety and worry, and 70% of medical problems due to worry. What's God's plan? Does God have a plan to help us overcome worry, or are we just doomed to be worriers? It's easy to say, well, I just can't help it. I just can't help it. But God says you can. God says you can. Verse 29 through 30 says, first of all, you got to learn to trust God. You got to learn to trust God. If you can trust Him of whether you're going to get to heaven, folks, can't you trust Him to take care of you here? I think so. Look what verse 29 says. These are some tough words. I tell you, when you read this, and I was reading it throughout the week, and I thought, wow, man, this is pretty tough stuff here. What does he say? Verse 29, don't keep striving for what you should eat and what you should drink, and don't be anxious. Now, okay, did that hit anybody here today? You ever? Yeah, it does, don't it? You're concerned about those things. Why does he say that we don't? Why does he say we as believers ought to not live that way? For the Gentile world eagerly seeks all these things, and your Father knows that you need them. Well, if your Father knows that you need them, what is that saying about what He said to us? He said He would supply every one of our needs. Now, the problem is sometimes we're not satisfied with our needs. We have a lot of wants, don't we? And we strive after things that maybe not God's plan. And we're always looking ahead and thinking if we could get here and here and here, and we bargain with God and we try to do all these things, and it doesn't really work. Now, what He's saying here is not a suggestion. This is not, would you please consider this? The way He put it is, listen, guys, this is what you need to do. It's a command. It's not an option. He says, stop seeking and doubting and worrying, but rather choose to trust God about the things that are beyond your control. Beyond your control. A lot of things are beyond my control. So I just quit panicking about those things. Well, I'll tell you what, all it causes is sleepless nights when you worry about things you can't control, folks. It does. And by so doing, you waste time on the things and you don't do the things that God has given you, or the things that you can control, folks. You can. That's kind of like having some hamburger in the refrigerator, but sitting around worrying because you don't have steak for dinner. Don't work, does it? It's just a different part of the cow, folks. God gave you what you needed that day, right? But we focus on those things. That's worrying about, how we're going to pay how we're going to get the house warm. If God wanted it to, they were hollering last night, it was going to be in the 20s, and man, it was comfortable, wasn't it, Steve? Yeah. Of course, it didn't have anything to do with all that people that was in that stadium, did it? You see, the reality is, folks, is we spend all this time worrying about all of this stuff that doesn't happen. And then we say, oh man, God bless us, it didn't happen. When God says live by faith, trust Him. The next thing He says is not only to trust God, but give God a priority position in your life. And what's the priority position that God needs to be in your life? You can do it because He really is number one, isn't He? He's supposed to be first. Look what verse 31 tells us. But seek His kingdom. Put Him first. And all the things you need will be provided for you. Folks, you can't get a return like that anywhere. Can you? You can. But instead of trusting Him, we keep trying to do it ourselves, don't we? What's God saying here? He's saying it very simple. Get your priorities straight. Get your priorities straight. Have you ever sat down and made a list? I make a list a lot of times of what's most important to you. You ever done that? One of the most challenging things that I think I have done in a long, long, long time was in a conference not too long ago, and is Kim out? She's probably with the kids or something. Okay. But it was in a conference that I was doing with hospice. And they did an exercise, and they asked us to write down, I think if I remember right, on 5 different pieces of paper, the most important things in our life. And then they said, you choose the one that you want to get rid of. So then you're having to choose the first or one of the 5 most important things, and you lay it aside. Then they tell you, turn to the person next to you, and they're going to turn to you, and you take 2 of their things away. And somebody just reaches over and takes a couple of things that are important to you away from you. And you do the same for the other person. Boy, it's a sick feeling, isn't it? There goes your home. There goes your family. There goes your children or something. And then a random person, because you only got 2 left, just walks through the room and looks at them and just picks up one and walks off with it. Boy, it's a gut-wrenching feeling, isn't it? If you ever tried that, you ought to try it sometime. It really will. But that's what it's like, folks, sometimes when you get sick or whenever life is going by the wayside. Those things that we take for granted, that's always going to be there, it's important for us, can be gone.